Shelley Luther, modern day martyr or lawless villain? Today, Andrea and I close the chapter on this saga and share our heated opinions about the matter. Welcome back to #Lawyered. Thank you guys for coming and joining us. You got myself, Austin Pennington, and my co-host, Andrea Seffens here. And we decided we wanted to devote an entire show to the saga, as my co-host put it, of Shelley Luther and Salon a la mode here in Dallas. And you know, we've been lucky enough to speak on this topic with a few people talk through some of this stuff. And I know you and I both have some pretty strong opinions about it.
No, really.
You wouldn't expect lawyers to have that, right? Not at all.
Of course not.
And I've enjoyed that because it's allowed us to get a little bit more emotional about some subjects that sometimes can be somewhat dry. But it really has seemed like it's controversial, not just in the legal circles, but really in our whole community.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I've heard people refer to her as, well, maybe some maybe not so nice words and a bit not thinking of others to a modern day Rosa Parks.
Right.
And so I think that there's this massive divide in opinions. And I think it's funny because a lot of our friends who are maybe in the legal world fall on one side, and our friends who do anything but legal fall on the other.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen. And, you know, some of it, I think we'll admit that we're biased a little bit. We're lawyers.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a side of us that I think some of the ignorance of what's happened bothers us. But just to kind of give us a little summary of how we got to this place, we actually released a video earlier last week that described a little bit of the factual background of how Shelley Luther how the story came into be and how we got to the point we're at right now. On Tuesday, Shelley Luther of Salon a la Mode was held in contempt of court, fined $7,000, and sentenced to 7 days in jail for violating the court's temporary restraining order. What happened here is that Shelley opened her salon in spite of the Dallas County shelter-in-place orders, in spite of Governor Abbott's orders to keep salons closed. So the city of Dallas went and applied for a temporary restraining order. Court issues that order, orders Ms. Luther not to open her salon, and she does it anyways. So, afterwards, City of Dallas asked the court to hold her in contempt. Judge Moyie of the 14th District Court explained his position on this matter and why he decided to ultimately hold her in contempt. And as Allison Harris of Fox 4 News explains, he offered her an out in this situation.
Your actions were selfish, putting your own interest ahead of those of the community in which you live. That they disrespected the executive orders of the state, the orders of the county, and this city.
He gave her a chance to avoid jail time if she apologized and promised to close until salons are allowed to reopen Friday. His offer did not compel her.
I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say that I'm selfish, because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids. So, sir, if you think the law is more important than kids getting fed, then please go ahead with your decision, but I'm not going to shut the salon.
The judge found Luther and her company, Hot Mess Enterprises, guilty of civil and criminal contempt of court. Luther was taken into custody, sentenced to 7 days in jail, one for each day her salon was open after the court ordered her to close, plus $1,000 for each day that it was open, totaling $7,000. She'll continue to be fined $1,000 for each day that it's open until Friday.
What's important to know here is that this is not a criminal conviction. It's not going to go on a record. It's not like getting a DWI. It's not like getting a drug possession charge on your record. It's simply punishment and the court using its inherent power to punish an individual for not complying with the temporary restraining order issued by the court. Ironically, this Friday marks the day salons may open up and continue to operate, and Ms. Luther probably created a bigger financial burden on herself by disobeying the court's order versus just being patient and waiting until she was allowed to open back up for business legally. And I kind of shed some light on my own opinion about what I think about this situation. And there's a whole lot to unpack here. We can't do it all, and we could sit and talk here for probably hours about all the different things that go with it. But I think the first thing that you and I discussed that we want to jump into is this was a contempt violation. This was not a violation of criminal law.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important to unpack because while maybe you and I and our friends who are lawyers know the difference. There's no reason for the general public really to know the difference unless you really like SVU, Law and Order, and even then, I don't know if they go into that.
Yeah, I don't think it goes into that
I really don't think so.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's important too, and we try to break it down in ways that everybody can understand. So obviously, people understand what a criminal conviction is. We've got DWI laws, we have laws against drug possession. You're arrested, you're charged, you're held in custody until you are assigned a bail, till the judge grants you a certain bail amount, and then you can bail out and then still have your day in court to where you're found either guilty or not guilty by a jury of your peers and beyond a reasonable doubt and all those things. And everybody understands that. I think what's gotten everybody up in arms here is that they believe that what happened to her is exactly that.
Which is not what happened.
Right. And that's the part, and this is the part where things get a little complicated, right? So you've got contempt violations that the court can order. And so court sends out an order. In this situation, it was a temporary restraining order. We've talked before about the ideas of orders related to family court and other things like that. But the way that our laws are set up in this state, in this country, in the federal system, if the court issues an order, you disobey that order, the court then has a hammer, so to speak, they can use to punish that disobedience. And, there's a difference between, with the contempt order, they're either trying to force you to comply or punish you for not complying.
For deterrence reasons.
And I think there's some confusion there as to, okay, well, it's the same outcome, right? I mean, if you're being ordered to be held in contempt in custody, isn't that the same as a criminal conviction? I mean, it's the same punishment, right?
No, not exactly, right? Because what you said earlier about how if it's actually criminal in nature, it will go on your record, versus here, when you're being held in civil contempt of court, you're simply being punished, either incarcerated, fined, or both, because you refuse to obey a civil court's order. And so at that point, it isn't going on your record, and there's nothing like the ramifications of having a criminal offense on your record.
Right. And, I've heard people also kind of cite the Bill of Rights talking about this situation.
Oh, yes.
Cruel and unusual punishment, right to a fair trial. But the difference is, again, this is a violation of a court's order, not a criminal offense like you were talking about. And so those rights don't attach.
They don't apply. And I think that's something, too, that people are getting so incredibly worked up about in this situation. And then so many others, too, but especially now and then in the general mask wearing, limitations on travel, coronavirus, fun restrictions. They're saying, what about my constitutional rights? My constitutional rights are being violated. And I'm like, whoa, y'all. Pump the brakes.
Right.
There's a difference.
Right.
Your constitutional rights are not what you think they are, and they don't apply in the way that you generally think that they might.
Yeah. And this isn't anybody's fault.
No.
Unfortunately, I think that our high schools should do a better job of teaching this. There should be curriculum that's there because it's good life skills.
100%.
And there's future episodes that we're going to talk about search and seizure and people actually knowing what their rights are in front of the police. But this is another example of if we would educate our citizens when they're younger so they understand what's going on, topics like this, there's great debate on it, but it would be a more informed debate.
And I think it would be also a debate as well that helps people keep their local government and their state governments a little bit more accountable, right? Because if you have a basic understanding of your rights and you have a basic understanding of how the law is going to work, not only are you aware of your rights, but you also know what to do and who to vote for when you want to keep your local government accountable.
Right. Yeah, and we were on the Female Founders podcast last week, and we're talking about this exact story, but we got into a discussion about that exact topic, which is part of what we want this show to do, is to inform our listeners so they have a better understanding of their rights. And so, one of the examples, or one of the opinions that you and I both share, and I know I can't speak for you on this because we're on the same page, is that this creates a dangerous situation moving forward because basically, and we'll get into some of these things, but this woman, defied the court's order and then it sent everybody into a frenzy. And the
tailspin.
Right. And the fallout from all this, the part that we didn't talk about in the video, because that was released before Governor Abbott did what he did, but the governor basically came out and said, well, look, I issued this executive order. I didn't intend for people to get arrested. First off, she wasn't arrested for violating these coronavirus-related executive orders. And that infuriated both of us on numerous levels, right? I mean, first off, she wasn't arrested.
No,
right?
she wasn't arrested. I mean, that's complete falsehood that's been perpetrated by people who are ignorant of how the process went and who don't even understand what basic arrest is.
Right. Well, and the problem I have with that, Governor Abbott, he's the governor. He knows what he's saying. It has great power. And you're going to use that verb when it's incorrect. So honestly, he's the one perpetuating the problem of people's misunderstandings. And everybody else is listening to what he's saying, and they're taking it as true because he's our elected official, right?
Well, sure. And I mean, look, so some of my friends who are lawyers, right, posted this story on Facebook or Instagram, and I normally don't read comments on Facebook.
Right.
I'm also barely ever on Facebook. So if I missed your birthday, sorry, I'm never on it. But some of the comments on one of my friends' posts were astounding. They just kept quoting what the governor was saying.
Right.
And I was like, excuse me, I don't think you understand. Like, you think you understand, but you don't.
Right.
Right? Like, there was no arrest. What he's saying isn't actually technically correct.
Right.
And you're getting yourself into a tizzy over something that procedurally was correct and that Judge Moyie was completely within his rights to do.
Yeah, and let's dive into that. So obviously we're both pissed off about the fact that Governor Abbott used the word arrested because he made this problem worse for everybody by saying that.
He makes everyone think it's a criminal offense when it's not.
Right, and we'll get into the him taking the court's power away in a second. But the court's power itself, people are like, well, she what law did she violate? So
let's back that up.
Right. So technically, she didn't violate a criminal law.
Correct.
We've already discussed that. What she did was she violated the court's order. So, the simplest way to do it is the judge said, do this. Well, judge said, don't do this. She did this, and then she was held in contempt. So if you want to say she violated a law, what she did was she failed to obey the court's order. And a lot of people have also looked at this and said, well, so he sent her to jail because she didn't apologize.
That drives me up a wall.
Right.
No, she did not. And we have a good friend who she was infuriated by this. She truly believed it. And I can't fault her for it because that's definitely how it's been portrayed in the media.
Right.
Okay, reporters, for the most part, are not attorneys.
Right.
And they're not going to have the same understanding for what these terms mean.
Right.
So it drives me up a wall that there's this narrative of, because she didn't apologize to the court for her behavior, she was arrested. No, absolutely not.
Right. And I think breaking down the sequence a little more helps too. So City of Dallas goes to Judge Moyie, says, listen, she's going to open her salon. She's not supposed to. We're asking you to grant a temporary restraining order telling her not to open. TRO. Judge Moyie says, okay, boom, here's my order. She's got to follow this order. Ms. Luther violates the order.
The court's order, and I think that's really important to emphasize.
Right.
She's violating the order that Judge Moyie issued.
Right. Not the Governor Abbott sent out.
Not the executive order.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Court's
Judge Moyie
order.
sent out. Right, exactly. In our legal system, your remedy at that point, if you're the City of Dallas, you go back to Judge Moyie and say, hey, look, you told her not to do this. She did it. Help. You don't call the police. You don't call the police. Yeah, right.
You want some enforcement, but the
Right.
way you get the enforcement in a civil case is going to the judge and saying, please enforce this.
Right.
And the only really realistic option that the court has is to say, I've got a stick and a carrot. And the stick in this situation is if you don't comply with my order, I have the ability and I can hold you in contempt of court.
Right.
Which carries the punishment, as we've discussed earlier, of incarceration and or a fine.
Well, and look at what he said in whenever he was going through this. He didn't put her in jail or hold her in contempt because she didn't apologize. He gave her the option to comply and apologize and just close the shop down for 2 more days. And then guess what? No contempt findings.
None whatsoever.
Right.
None.
And the important part about that too is contempt is not to arrest. Contempt is to force compliance, to force somebody to follow the order you already told them to follow, or to punish. I mean, right there, that was him trying to get her to follow it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would be helpful too for a lot of people to maybe see this work out in a situation where it comes up a lot. So say a family law situation.
Absolutely. And that's what happens, a court comes out, mom says that, hey, look, me and my kids are in danger. And so she goes to her lawyer, the lawyer goes to the judge and says, look, we've got these acts of violence, of threats, we've got these problems. We need a temporary restraining order, the TRO. We need you to say, don't come near the house, don't talk to the kids, don't be around until we can have a hearing to at least sort some of this stuff out. Judge says, you're right, boom, here's your TRO. It's issued, it's served on the father, and he's told you cannot come around this home. In a typical situation, if he violates that order, he doesn't get arrested, contrary to a lot of people's beliefs. He doesn't get arrested. The mother then goes back to court and says, Judge, here's your order. Here's what he did. Violates the order. Do something, please. Judge either fines him, holds him in contempt, puts him in jail, does whatever the judge wants to do under the powers of the court. But that's him enforcing the order to maintain the safety and really just maintain the peace that the law is supposed to provide.
Absolutely.
Within his powers.
It's the exact same procedural mechanism that we're seeing with Shelley Luther. I mean, it's no different. And so I don't understand why people are so up in arms and fussing, saying that the court is going above and beyond its power, that they're acting out of turn, that they're acting inappropriately. No, Judge Moyie was doing exactly what Texas state judges have been able to do for, I don't even know how long, but a really freaking long time.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's in a family law situation or in this civil business situation.
Right.
Same procedure.
Well, and going back to the family law situation, if that does occur, if the judge says, you know what, you intentionally and consciously disregarded what I said, I told you not to go by the house, you did. The judge then, let's say in the situation, judge puts him in jail for 7 days and fines him $7,000.
Why not?
If somebody then, say the mayor or the police chief or some other person comes in and says,
I don't know, maybe the attorney general.
That would be a good one because their role in child support and all the other things. What if the attorney general then comes in and says, Judge, your order was a little too broad. I didn't like it. The rules that we promulgate, the rules that we put out at the attorney general's office, we didn't intend for fathers to be arrested for trying to go back in their home to grab some possessions, even though you told them not to. So we're going to rescind that order. We're going to change the way that we issue out child support orders.
We want you to revoke what you did.
Right. Well, okay, then if that's the case, then what's the incentive for the father to follow the court's order?
What's even the point of even going to the court and asking for this relief?
Right.
You've completely, at this point, I mean, I know it's a slippery slope argument, but I think it's a very relevant and pertinent slippery slope argument, because then the entire point of the court issuing orders for compliance, whether it be in the family law situation, in a civil law situation, or whether it's between, this is a purely hypothetical example, this is not happening to my knowledge, so not real, Apple and Dell are like fighting at each other,
Right.
and, you know, one is required to turn over documents to the other, and they're like, no. Okay, well, you can't prove your case without those documents, so how are you going to get them if they're just free to ignore the court's order without any ramification?
And there's no stick.
And there's no stick.
And that's the problem in this situation. Going back to Shelley Luther's situation, is Governor Abbott, after the fact, then comes out and says what he says. The Attorney General gets involved, voices his opinion.
Yeah.
And basically what they did is they said, okay, well, we said this. We didn't really mean it. I mean, we didn't mean it. We're the executive, so we're the law enforcement. That's what the executive branch does. They enforce the laws that Congress makes. And then the judicial system, the judges and courts, are supposed to interpret those laws. The enforcers are now saying, you as the interpreters, the judges, I didn't like how you interpreted that, so I'm going to change it. You interpreted what I said different than what I liked, so now I'm going to change it to where you can't interpret that way any longer. And I'm going to get real extreme here, but that was the lack of separation there is the big problem that our founders had with the way the King of England ran his country.
Oh,
and then
100%.
how he treated the colonies. And that's why our founders drafted the Constitution in such a way that hadn't been changed in the centuries that since it's been enacted.
And I mean, the fundamental system of checks and balances, like Schoolhouse Rock, anyone, the little cartoon
There you
with
go.
like I don't even remember it. I was like 16 when I saw it. So checks and balances are so critically important, right, for our government to work at both or at all levels, local, state, federal. If you get rid of an independent judiciary, which essentially is what this would lead to, right?
Yeah.
This erosion of the independent judiciary because the executive can be like, well, take backs.
Yeah, right.
Not what I meant.
Right.
Undo it. Okay, well then the judiciary is no longer a check on the executive branch. They
Right.
won't be a check on the legislature. And so you're eroding your biggest protector of protecting your civil liberties, your constitutional rights, because now all you have is the executive, which, by the way, has the full weight of the United States military, army, all those.
And even just the police force at the local level.
Police force at the local
right.
level, and then your legislature. So who's going to who's going to watch them?
Right.
If you don't have an independent
Right.
judiciary?
Right.
No one.
And what's the point of having lawyers? What's the point? Let's just have anarchy and let's just go straight to dictatorship or communism, whatever it is you want to call it.
Oligarchy.
And I don't get extreme with this, but that's the whole point of this. That's the reason that it's so upsetting, is because we have a system set up. The people who we trust to enforce and enact that system are blurring the lines in ways that are not helpful. Because here's the other part. Let's just think about it, this exact example. What was the incentive for all the other salon owners who followed the executive order? Were they rewarded? No, they weren't.
And it was detrimental to them. Maybe
Right.
they're losing business, so
Right.
they definitely are losing business. And this other person can go and maybe take their customers.
Right.
I mean, that is so unfair to the other salon owners and these other salon owners who are trying to keep their parents and family members safe and their children safe, and they're trying to do their part to fight this global pandemic.
Right.
What gives Shelley Luther the right to say, I am above listening to the court, I am above the concerns of endangering the health and welfare of my community, that even though everyone else has to play by the rules, I have decided I am above the rules, and I'm just gonna open my salon and get some business, maybe get a little extra business because everyone else is closed.
Yeah. Well, and
That
I
is
think,
unfair to me.
I mean, what you said sounded eerily similar to what Judge Moyie said and whenever he was reading out the reasons that he was upset. And I know both you and I, and we don't have to get on a long tangent about this because I doubt Judge Moyie listens to this podcast.
But if he does, I would be so flattered.
Right. But you and I both, we've practiced in front of Judge Moyie plenty
Absolutely.
of times. In our opinion, one of the most consistent, intelligent, fair-minded judges we have on the bench in Dallas.
Absolutely.
And he's caught a lot of flack for this. Whereas we think, honestly, he was being, well, I don't want to speak for you yet, but in my opinion, he was being brave and doing what he believed to be right under his power bestowed upon him by the Constitution and his job as the judge in that situation.
I would absolutely agree with that. And he was doing what every Texas state judge in this situation should have done.
Right.
He was taking the law, or in this situation, the executive orders, issuing a TRO, creating a court order to make sure she is in compliance. And then when she didn't, okay, then you face the punishment for not complying. He's simply enforcing the rules.
Right.
And that is what any judge is supposed to do, right? Have a good understanding of the rules, have an understanding of the situation, listen to both sides, and then make a ruling by applying the law or the rules to the facts.
Right.
And I want to be careful when I say the law, right? Because I don't want people to say, oh, but I thought you said she didn't violate a law.
Right.
Which is true.
Right.
We went into that already. And so I think that especially he was being brave because in Texas, we still elect our judges, y'all.
Exactly.
Which is
Exactly.
a huge newsflash to some people.
Right.
If you don't like what Judge Moyie did, first of all, I would say write your legislature, right? Write your
Yeah.
congressman, write your
Yeah.
representative. If you don't like how the judges have the ability to hold people in contempt of court, ask that the law be changed, petition.
Right.
We have so many opportunities in America, especially in Texas, to fight for laws that we don't like. Okay? But that aside, you can also just not vote for him
Right.
if you
Right.
don't like him.
And we said when we started the show that we don't mind sharing our political views and being open
No,
about
not at
everything.
all.
I would definitely, if people are thinking about not voting for Judge Moyie, do your research and really understand what's going on.
Please do.
Because for one, understand this situation better. And that's what we're trying to do here. But two, understand what he does day in and day out on the bench. Because again, I say this again, one of the best judges we have in our county, in my opinion.
I think so.
And it's not because he always rules for me either. That's definitely not the case. But here's the other part of this, because you touched on it just then. Shelley Luther had other options for how to, instead of going vigilante, because that's the thing, vigilantism, it's romantic, it's fun to think about, we see it in the movies.
Who doesn't want to be Spider-Man?
Well, that's a good point. I would have gone, maybe with Batman or something like that.
he's pretty cool, too.
Maybe in this situation, Robin Hood, you're kind of rising above
Yes.
the law. But regardless, that sounds great and all, but if everybody's going to be a vigilante, one, that's impossible to enforce and control, and all of a sudden we're living in anarchy. But two, we have laws and checks and balances and procedures in place to allow for you, if you're pissed off about something, to do something about it. I mean, what could she have done if she was mad about this TRO, or even before that, she's mad about the executive order? What other options did she have?
I mean, she has lots of options. She can ask for like a dispensation, and I'm using that word very loosely, right? Because that's not the actual legal term. But you can write to your representative. You can petition to have the rules changed or the rules lifted.
Right.
You contact your congressman, your representative, write a letter to Clay Jenkins, the person who is in charge of Dallas County for issuing these sorts of orders. You have a lot of options. She could have also looked at getting various different loans from various different programs at the federal level. And I haven't done my research on this, but I imagine there's likely some sort of new loan or help options at the state level in addition to what's already been previously offered standard-wise to small businesses and employers. You have a lot of options, and you also have the ability to go talk to an employment attorney and discuss what to do with your employees, or they're probably 1099 independent contractors.
Yeah.
You could have done, and you had a lot of options. If you had just, meaning Shelley Luther, if she had consulted an employment attorney, I think they could have been creative and come up with a lot of other options besides, trying to be Batwoman and be a vigilante and say F the law, F the court's order, and I'm just going to do my thing.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so I'll share one little side view I had that's probably is controversial. There've been some people that said, well, she couldn't get a payroll protection loan because she had 1099 employees. Okay, well, honestly, my answer to that is she enjoyed tax savings for years and years and years by not paying W-2 employees. So you kind of made your own choice there to not have employees, taking care of your own employees. You want to talk about your salon owners are starving. You should have had them on W-2. If you didn't, okay, well, I'm sorry, you don't get the benefits of employers like myself, for example, who run my own small business, who have my employees on W-2 payroll because we are taking care of them. So yes, we get the payroll protection loan. But I'll get off that soapbox. More importantly, though, hell, what she could have done, First Amendment right, arrange a protest.
Absolutely.
I mean, people are doing that already, and there's people that disagree with it, but that's our right as Americans
that's
to do
fine.
that.
You have free speech.
Yeah, arrange a protest. Arrange some kind of a peaceful demonstration. Arrange a press conference.
Although with the caveat that we do want you to be socially responsible and, if possible, socially distanced.
Well, right. But you see what I'm saying, though.
Of course,
she could have done something like that. She obviously figured out a way to get front and center in the PR world.
Oh,
with this
absolutely.
Stunt.
This was a great PR stunt.
It was. And she could have used that leverage to go and do something different that didn't result in this huge whirlwind it's been probably a windfall for her.
Oh, I'm sure she'll probably get loads of customers after this because they really think that she's a modern day Rosa Parks, that she's a modern day martyr, and she is standing up to big bad government and legislating from the bench and saying, no, I'm going to stand up for my rights as a small businesswoman. I'm a proud Texan. I like my small business, and I will take care of my 1099 independent contractors, even though I couldn't be bothered to make them employees.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of putting a close on all this stuff, personal opinion, two things I want to hear that I want us to talk about. One is, what does this mean going forward? What should we be scared of? And two, maybe the first, maybe switch the order of this, two being, what's your opinion of why Shelley Luther actually went forward and did all this?
Well, let me answer that last one first.
Yeah.
Great. So we've already discussed she had a lot of options. Maybe she didn't know them because she couldn't, take the time to call an employment attorney. There are lots of them in this city, and ask, hey, what are my options? I would like to discuss them, please. Definitely have that option. Instead, which would have been, a low-key route, you are not going to be on the front page news, You're not going to be reported by WFAA, you're not going to make national headlines. And so I think by pulling this PR stunt, I think that's exactly what it was this PR stunt. And she wants to get front and center. She wants the attention on her salon. And she wants people to realize, hello, I'm in business. I stand up for values of small business Texans. And you should come support me and support my fight against the government by getting your hair done at my salon, not my competitors.
That's very well said. And I would agree with that because I think that I agree with 100% of what you said and what Judge Moyie said, that she put her own interests in front of those of others. And I will comment, one of the quotes, and I know I said this on one of our other interviews that drove me nuts, was when she said, if you think the law is more important than feeding children. Oh, well, look,
I can't.
Well, quite honestly, to be blunt, it is more important than feeding children because the laws are there to maintain order and make sure that we can end up in a society that, under our democratic principles, allows for peaceful assembly, allows for our laws to be enforced, allows for our court systems to work properly, so that problems like kids getting food and people making money are taken care of and they're worked out in the free market. There were plenty of programs. If the salon owners' kids were really hungry, there's been so many help and relief efforts out there. So many
Loads
people.
of them.
So to say that is, one, to be lazy, two, to be short-sighted, three, again, to be selfish, because I do think she was trying to be front and center on all this.
Absolutely. And not even just the different state, local, and federal programs that are out there, to help people with kids that are going hungry. But during the era of coronavirus, the massive amounts of initiatives taken by private companies like HG Supply & Co., down on Lower Greenville, is just one example of people stepping up to the plate and helping those who are hungry. And then you have all these different nonprofits in the area that specifically target children who are being not properly fed or, suffering some other, I don't want to say abuse because that's a very loaded term.
Right.
But
setbacks,
Yeah, other setbacks.
Yeah.
So there are so many options, right?
Right.
And this was, it was not necessary.
Yeah.
It was not necessary. And so to me, that leads me to think that either what I said earlier, this was a complete PR stunt and she's putting her interests first, she wants the business, or she's just dumb.
Yeah. Well,
But I really don't think she's
I don't think she's dumb.
I don't think she's dumb. She did all this. So I really don't think she's dumb.
And I think she's a very intelligent person. I mean, you heard her, she speaks very well, and I think she thought this through, like you said.
And saying that bit about the kids, I mean, come on, that is like gold for like a headline in a newspaper, and it's like the perfect 140 characters or less for Twitter. It would be think of the Instagram posts that can go with that. Like this blowing up on social media because it's such a good snippet.
Right.
So how did you not? This was planned.
No, absolutely. So what does this mean going forward? What are you concerned with going forward with this type of situation?
Sure. So I'm really concerned about the independent judiciary maintaining their independence and the executive branch, aka our governor, not meddling with our judiciary moving forward. And also, I just want to say and give a shout out to all of the civil district judges in Dallas County. They wrote a letter and all of them signed off on it and sent it to the Attorney General and saying that, you as a member of the Texas State Bar engaged in inappropriate conduct by speaking directly to Judge Moyie about this decision that he made, okay?
Right. Because the Attorney General wrote a letter admonishing or criticizing him, right?
Yes.
And directly to him.
Yeah, and that's ex parte communication, which is strictly forbidden.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, there's only in the most rare of circumstances can you get any sort of ex parte communication that doesn't fly in the face of the Texas lawyers, ethics creed.
Right.
And so at the end of the day, I want my judiciary to know that they are safe in enforcing the rules, that they are safe to do their jobs, and that they are encouraged to do their jobs, and that the executive orders, are not going to come back to bite them when the governor's like, hey, by the way, I changed my mind. I don't like what you did.
Right. And that's my concern going forward is that the way our law works, you think about the civil rights movement, you think about all the things that went through during the New Deal, during the Great Depression era. Our law and our court system, a lot of times, are in highly publicized, highly polarizing situations, and they're dealing with them. Roe versus Wade and the abortion.
Yes.
Gay rights as far as marriage is concerned.
Obergefell.
All this stuff, it's highly spotlighted.
Absolutely.
And everybody's paying attention because it's setting, this is what's going to happen moving forward. The concern I have is that this was a highly contentious, highly publicized situation. Coronavirus has touched everything. And because of that, the executive branch allowed the lines to be blurred, took action that they should not have been allowed to take. And that concerns me with highly publicized situations moving forward. And admittedly, it'll probably be few and far between because the only time we see stuff like this that's just blown way up is when we have a hugely controversial situation. But that's a problem because that creates issues with how this stuff's going to be handled moving forward. And look, I'll be the first to say that I agree with Shelley Luther that I thought the executive orders were too broad. I think a lot of stuff stepped over the bounds. As a business owner, I get it. So I totally understand where she's coming from. I support that perspective, but I can't support nor be on board with her actions because I do believe they were selfish. And I think I'm probably more upset with Governor Abbott than I am her because he's the one that's in power and has knowledge and has the ability to let the system do what it's supposed to do. But I just think that we've created a huge problem here that our citizens need to understand and hopefully do understand a little better so they can be educated when they debate about this.
And if nothing else, guys, don't you want to be that really suave, smart person who asks the best questions and really creates a compelling narrative at your next cocktail party, when you don't have to socially distance about these sorts of issues? Because you can do that if you're educated about your basic laws.
Well, they may not, because it seems like we're probably in the minority with the people that think that Shelley was out of her mind, or that this whole situation has gone the wrong direction. But we wanted to devote this full episode to discussing the situation, because there's so much to unpack. Hopefully, I would love the opportunity to sit down and debate this with Shelley, because
I would too.
Because look, I think she's got a perspective, she's got an opinion. I would love to debate this back and forth. It would be great. But we both hope that after talking about this, at least everybody understands what really happened, what's working behind the scenes in all this, and actually how this played out.
And that at the end of the day, you can actually have a conversation. You don't have to have the same opinion as Austin. You can be a completely different opinion, and that's fine. Just educate yourselves, listen to the other person, and be able to hold two different ideas in your head at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for joining us on #Lawyered, trending in law and business in Dallas, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.